a raw file on top of itself. You understand what I'm saying? Like if you have a JPEG and you mess with it, and you you save it, if you don't save it as a new file name, you just print it over your original JPEG. And your original now is gone forever, because you just, copy it over top of it. And that's one of the shortcomings of JPEGs, is you gotta know what you're doing. You start messing around and cropping them and doing all these other things. You've got to know that you've got to save it with a new name so that you don't copy over your original. We'll talk about some archiving things that will help you so you don't have to worry so much about making that mistake. But that's for another session. Okay, so of these four, your camera will have sRGB and Adobe 1998 RGB. I recommend setting it to Adobe. So what we end up with in the end then is when we get, see your color space, it should show you those two. In terms of all the things we've talked about, more is better to me. If you've got lots of pixels, then you can waste them later. But if you don't have them, you're lost. So you have the best qualities, which is the most pixels that you can say, the least amount of compression, so you have the highest quality. And then your color space is a larger color space, Adobe RGB. So those all take up a little bit more space, but it's well worth it down the road. Okay, so that's all of that. Now, with all that information, let's see if we can really mess you over. It's a numbers game in a lot of ways. Okay, so do you remember the three things that affect the exposure or the image? What are the three things on your camera that will affect it? ISO. All right, come on. All right. Aperture. And shutter speed. Okay. Now, the crazy thing about this, these guys all work together. Okay? And here's how they work together. All right. So, let's we're going to have a fulcrum here in the middle. This is going to represent our ISO. All right? On this side, we're going to do our shutter speed. Okay, over here, we're going to do our apertures. And then we're going to start this, see if I can do this. Small, larger, larger, larger. I'm going to run out of space. It's supposed to be a circle, but it's an oval. All right. So, let's say, all right, let me talk about this for a minute. Shutter speed, 1/30th of a second, is represented like this, just 30. But it really means 1/30th of a second. Okay? It's not a full second. It's 1/30th of a second. So then, actually it should be, let's go 50. And these things don't always run exact. Okay, remember what we talked about in terms of motion and shutter speed? Rushing water. What kind of shutter speed would I want to use? What? Anywhere up here, 500 or 1,000, all right? This area, going this way, all right? We're going to stop action. This way, if we go down, slower shutter speeds are going to get blurred. Now, blur isn't necessarily bad. It's an artistic expression. If you want blur, that's how you know how to create it. All right? If you want to stop action, you know you have to shoot faster. If you want to blur, you shoot slower. All right, but here's the kicker. All right? Let's say this is ISO. Let's make this ISO 200 to start with, just for kicks. All right? And we shoot something at ISO 200 at 1/100th of a second. And this one just happens to be that this will be, oh, let me see what I got here. This will be 1 point, I think it's 1.8. Can't remember what my numbers are. Okay, so at F4, F means, I don't know what that means. It's a mathematical terminology. It has to do with the number of millimeters wide the hole is, okay? And it's mathematically here and here. On your cameras, most of the time, now because of the new electronics, things got really weird. It never used to be this way. On your camera, when you went from 30th to a 50th, that was one step. All right, this was from here to here is twice as fast in terms of the amount of light. From here to here was twice again. So from here to here is 4 times. Everything was mathematically related to each other. So you go all the way up the chart like that. Same thing on this side. This is twice as much light as this is. And this is twice as much light as this is, all the way up the chart. All right? So if you were at F16 and you opened up, you just let in twice as much light. Over here, you change from 500 to, it should be 250, it's really next step up. And there's a, I forget what it is between. So if you go from this fast speed to this, you're letting in twice as much light over here, okay? So, if you were to do something crazy, let's see. So this is a proper exposure right here, all right? F4, ISO 200, 1/100th of a second, okay? So, I want to go down here because I want to make sure everything behind my subject is out of focus. So I want to do this. Okay? Now, in order to make that, if this was proper, all right, that was a correctly exposed image, but now I want to change the f-stop here, what else has to change to get that proper exposure? All right, the shutter speed needs to change. How much? Okay, remember I went from here to here, I added twice as much light, and then I added twice as much light again. So from here to here, it's 4 times as much light. So I have to offset that on the other, one of these other places. Now I can do it here, or I can do it here, or I can do it in both of them. Okay, that's the crazy thing about this. All right, there's 100 down here, there's 400 up here. Most of your cameras won't go below 100. Some of them will do 50, it's kind of a specialty thing, but most of them, the bottom is 100, and you know, there's this range 800, and then some of them just keep on going, 1600. Most of you, I would recommend not going above 1600. Cameras start to take some really funny stuff. But most of you keep it in this range right here. All right, so if I didn't change this, then I got to move twice as much light, or let's see, I have to take half as much. So from here to here is half as much, and from here to here is half as much. So I would have to go up here, all right, to match this. Okay? You follow that?
But if you were wanting it blurred, why would you go up, not down?
Well, this has to do, I'm wanting to deal with depth of field. You deal with depth of field over here, all right? This is all depth of field. This is the picture of the flower and the background. F-I-E, is that right? L-D? Except after C, okay. If I was dealing with water, I'd be dealing with shutter speed. See, it depends on your subject, what you're dealing with. Are you dealing with action? You deal with it over here. Are you dealing with depth of field? You deal with that over here. Depth of field, like that flower picture, it doesn't matter how fast the shutter speed is, as long as it gives you a good exposure, all right? Now, here's where things get really wild. I could do this. An 1.8 opening at 100 ISO, and I would only have to go to 250. And I would get the same exposure that this one is right here. All right? And this one. All three of those lines represent a similar exposure, because all three of those factor into the overall exposure of the picture. But you get different effects based on the speed and the aperture. So that's where things get really tricky. But if you can grasp onto this, this is the creative side of photography right here. Those three factors are what controls the amount of light getting in and exposing your image. Follow? Clear as mud? All right, just know that shutter speed, you're dealing with action or blur. F-stop or aperture, you're dealing with depth of field. And this is a third factor, that is a variable. All three of these are variables that all interrelate together to give you exposure. Okay? That's a lot of stuff. All right, what are we doing for time?
7:45.
Okay, that's just about right. That's all we're going to deal with in terms of bookwork, okay? Now we're going to have some fun.
Well, wait, let me ask you something.
Sure.
The 1.0 and 2.8,
Yes,
is that like your f-stops?
yes, ma'am.
So that's not really the iOS thing, that's like the aperture, right? Or
That's not the ISO, no.
Okay, because you had ISO under it, and I was like, I'm confused.
Okay, yeah, when I saw that, I said, I really should have done that the other way.
Okay.
My bad. I just took what you were telling me. Yeah, this is ISO over here. This is aperture. Yep. So aperture, depth of field, shutter speed, action or blur. Soccer games, baseball games, streams, waterfalls, cyclists, cars, trucks, speedway, anything that has lots of action going on. Your son's t-ball game, whatever. Action. Flowers, trees, even people, all right? If you're taking pictures in a crowd, but you only want, your nephew or your niece to be the center of attention in that picture, you can either scream out and say, "Everybody get out of the way!" Or you can use depth of field to throw the rest of them out of focus. All right? That only your niece or nephew is in focus. And when you do that, you got to deal with these other two things as well to get a good exposure. Now your cameras are pretty good about telling you, when you change one thing, you can visually see depth of field. If you press there's a review button on your cameras. And also in the camera, when you're looking through, you can see that, your exposure's off. So you can change something else to get the exposure back under control. So you've got the depth of field you want, you don't want to mess with that again. So now you have to mess with either your ISO or your shutter speed to get proper exposure. That's the balance between these three things. That's how they all factor together to take a good exposure. Got it? All right, we're going to play with it. We're going to play with it. So we'll see. Sometimes it just takes goofing around with it. We can talk and laugh and goof off and figure this out as we go. So that's the end of the book learning part right here. Now it's hands-on your camera. I hope everybody's camera has plenty of power and you got plenty of memory space. I don't know how many pictures you're going to take, but we're going to start playing. So what I've got is we got two areas that we've got artificial lights that we can use that will help us. And I need something to photograph, so I just happened to bring along some of my favorite friends. Snoopy. Oh, now, I got him to stand up the other day. Just gotta get him on the board right. And I brought some of his friends, Snoopy and Snoopy. Compliments of MetLife. If you don't like Snoopy, you can play around with my Gumby rabbit. Or Mr. Potato Head. Okay? So what we're going to do, and what I want you to do with these, especially with my Snoopies, I want you to have 2 or 3 or 4 of them in a picture. Oh, I guess he's my environmental Snoopy. I haven't quite figured out what he is yet. That's my Speedway, my soccer player. Give him his ball. What I want you to do is take pictures of these guys spaced out like this, shooting down at it, so that you start playing with your depth of field. I want you to try, see if you can get all 3 of them in focus at the same time. This should give us enough light to be able to do that. All right? And you can all take turns here. Don't fight over my Snoopies. And if you take one, I'm going to track you down. But I don't know how many you can get in there. But you start having fun. And then start doing different settings with your cameras. You can work together in teams if you want to and play around with your settings. And it's going to take an F16 at least to get all 4 of those in focus. And just a clue, it might be the difference between an F16 of focusing on this guy, or this guy, or this guy. It just depends on which guy you focus on at F16, how many are you going to get in focus. That's a whole other ballgame we haven't even started to talk about yet in terms of depth of field. That's why we do it rather than talk about it, because it's easier to do it and figure it out on the fly than to try to explain it to you. But it does make a difference if you have a high depth of field like F16 or even F22. I don't know if you can get, if you already get F22, if your camera will go that high, you're going to have to go with a higher ISO. Okay? You got it, because there ain't that much light. Even this thing, doesn't carry that much light. And if you want to set your color balance instead of auto, what kind of light is this? What kind of artificial light? There's a term for it. What are these? Fluorescent. What's this?
Incandescent.
Incandescent, yes. So this would be an incandescent setting. and your color balance. So that'll counteract the warmth, okay? Instead of being yellow and yellow-orange, like you normally would get in the old pictures, you know, inside, this will kind of balance it out to a normal, whatever that is, color balance, okay? So, and then with this guy over here, what I want you to do, and we can take a couple of the other guys over there too, I guess. Mr. America here, is I want you to play with shooting. We haven't even talked about this that much, but I want you to deal with different angles when you shoot this. You can shoot, notice this guy, his hat will maneuver a little bit. He can maneuver up and down a little bit. His hat will slide back. You can try shooting down at him, shoot tabletop level at him. If you set him on the edge of the table, you might be able to shoot up at him. Okay, just experiment with some different angles. And what we're going for is we're trying to understand what vantage point makes for the best kind of picture. Now, it might depend on what you're going for, you know. One of the things that we're going to talk about along the way, over and over again, has to do with, why am I taking that picture? What do I want to accomplish with that picture? Do I want to show my son, you know, his exuberance after he just scored, you know, a run? Do I want to catch him in action, hitting the ball at the plate? Okay, if I do that, can you get that good picture from the stands? Oh. You might have to move up beside the dugout. You might have to shoot with a longer lens to get a close-up so you don't have the whole team on the other side of the picture. You just want your son in the picture. We haven't started talking about that, the whole thing about the lenses, you know, wide-angle lens, a telephoto lens. That's all stuff we'll work on next time, you know, a lot more, but we can kind of play around with that stuff now. So what I want you to do is just take some time and go mess around with these, and I'll go around and be there with you. We can talk about the settings on your camera.